Hello, 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 everybody. This is Sneaker Steens, and this is Monday Mindfulness. And tonight, my guest is Rich Lewis. He is an author, speaker, and coach who focuses on centering prayer as a means of inner transformation. He teaches centering prayer in both his local and virtual community and offers one-on-one coaching. Rich, Rich's newest book is titled Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. He publishes a weekly meditation. He has book reviews and interviews on his site, Silence Teaches. He has published articles for a number of organizations, including Contemplative Life, Abbey of the Arts, Contemplative Outreach, Erdward in Search of a New Eden, The Ordinary Mystic at Pathos, and The Contemplative Writer. Rich has been a daily practitioner of centering prayer since June 1st, 2014. Centering prayer has been so life-giving and life-changing that he feels compelled to share his journey with others who wish to learn more. Rich teaches with his family in Amberlin, Pennsylvania. Learn more about him at www.silenceteaches.com. And tonight, you can hear from him firsthand on our show. So with no further ado, we'd like to welcome Rich Lewis. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So please tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and why exactly you do it.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I practice centering prayer, as you shared in the introduction. So I guess I can tell you how I found centering prayer.
Okay.
So I had always been attracted to silence. I just didn't know what to do in this silence. And I had learned about the transforming power of silence. I read some books by Carl McColman, probably back in 2010, 2011, and he talked a lot about silence and how healing and transforming it was. But I don't remember him sharing a practice in any of his books. So I would just practice silence and sit for 1 or 2 minutes or 5 minutes. And at that time, it was brutally difficult, but I knew it was powerful. But then I was perusing Amazon in late 2013, looking for a book to read, and I came across a book called Healing the Divide, Recovering Christianity's Mystic Roots by Amos Smith. And in this book, two things jumped out at me. One, he talked about centering prayer, which was a practice that you can do in the silence. And two, he talked about what he called the Jesus paradox, that Jesus is God and human at once. So I reached out to Amos and started asking him questions really about both. And I began practicing centering prayer. And I began reading other authors' books on centering prayer. And I began practicing centering prayer. And I basically started, I jumped in the centering prayer swimming pool June 2014, where I decided to take it real serious and practice twice a day for 20 minutes. So that's a little bit about me, how I kind of stumbled across centering prayer, because I needed a practice in the silence, but I didn't know of one. And I found one in a book by Amos Smith and then began practicing centering prayer.
Yeah, I can tell you that sitting in silence can be very difficult because I remember when I first started practicing mindfulness, it was hard. And so, can you tell me about when you first started and finding that center and being in silence? How were you able to get yourself to just center and focus and be in silence in that moment?
I think I was just ready for centering prayer because I had all that practice in silence with no practice, not really knowing what I was doing. And then when I discovered centering prayer, it was a method of how you practice in the silence. So centering prayer really is a practice as well as a relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
So when I began practicing centering prayer seriously in June of 2014, it wasn't that difficult. I think I was just ready for it. Probably if I had tried it a couple years earlier, maybe it probably would have been difficult. So I think I was just ready for the practice at that time. That's pretty much, or I can explain what centering prayer. I think you probably need to know what centering prayer is.
Yeah, go ahead if you will. Just go ahead and establish to us what centering prayer is all about.
Right, because people are wondering what the heck is this centering prayer he keeps talking about. So it's silent. It's silent prayer, meaning it's wordless prayer. and it's both meditation but also a relationship with God. And centering prayer itself was created in the early 1970s by three Trappist monks, three Catholic priests, really as a reaction to they saw people practicing transcendental meditation and they wanted something for Christians. So they created centering prayer in the early 1970s and taught it to the priests and the clergy. And then they began rolling it out to ordinary people, regular people teaching it. And then in 1984, they created the contemplative outreach, which actually, if you, exactly that, contemplativeoutreach.com, or I'm not sure if it's .com or .org, but that's the main centering prayer organization, which really is now an international organization. So if you would go on that site, you'll see all kinds of information about centering prayer, and you can also find different groups that practice all in the U.S. as well as internationally.
Wow.
So, and then centering prayer itself, there's really four guidelines or steps of how you practice centering prayer. So you sit comfortably, you close your eyes, and then interiorly you introduce what's called the sacred word. And the sacred word is something you choose. So it's generally one, two, or three syllables of a word. So it could be God, it could be Jesus, it could be the ocean, it could be a color. So some short syllable word. So you sit comfortably, close your eyes, and then to begin your practice, to begin your prayer time, your sit with God, you introduce this word interiorly into your mind. And then whenever you engage your thought, and what I mean by that is whenever you begin planning, what am I going to do when I get up from my sit, or when you begin thinking about things you did before your sit, you realize you're doing everything but sitting with God. Because the purpose of centering prayer is to sit and with God and open to the presence and actions of God within, and let go of you and all of your thoughts and all of your emotions and all your planning and plotting and goal setting and whatever else you might do. So with the use of your word, whenever you have these thoughts that you're engaging and following and seeing where they go, you reintroduce that word to let go of your thoughts. And then you even let go of that sacred word. So it's not used as a mantra, and there are practices that use mantras. Centering prayer doesn't use it as a mantra where you're saying it over and over again. You're simply using it when you need it. And you do this whenever you need to during the duration of your prayer. So if you've decided to sit for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes, when you need to, you use your sacred word. Sometimes you don't need it and you naturally bring yourself back. Other times you find you need it to use it frequently to keep bringing yourself back for the purpose of the prayer, which is really just to sit with God, let go of you, and open to the presence and actions of God within. And also say something about the sacred word. It doesn't have to be a word. So if you're an auditory person, people like to use a word. Some people are visual, and I'm more of a visual person, and I realize that. So I actually use an interior image. Some people are more physical people, so they use their breath to come back. And then
Mm.
others are afraid they're going to fall asleep during centering prayer, so they'll actually keep their eyes open and stare at a spot 3 or 4 feet, maybe ahead in the distance or down on the ground, to kind of keep them focused and in the present moment. So that's a little bit about what it is, when it was created, and how you do it.
Wow. I really love that because it really goes hand in hand with mindfulness, because I always say focus on the breath, and I teach people how to breathe and how our breath is the first thing that we should notice, because that's what God gave us. And without breath, we don't have life. And so I think that is just so beautiful how it goes hand in hand, because you also said that you could use the breath to be centered in that time with God. And so I really love that. And I think I might learn to start using that in the mindfulness, as far as some people have a hard time focusing on the breath. So being able to center on that word and spending that time with God, I think that can help them go to another level. Can you talk about the relationship, though, that you encounter with centering with God?
Sure. So again, as I said, some people will say, is it just meditation? And it is, but it's really a practice that opens us up to contemplative prayer, which is really as pure as the presence of God as we can. So it's a relationship where you're sitting with God, letting go of yourself, and just being, your little being with big being. It's a different way of praying, and people perhaps it's confusing, or it's not a way people think of prayer, but it's a different way of prayer. So it's not verbal prayer, it's not chanting or singing. It's actually sitting with God and letting God. I think of it as a reverse prayer. God is praying in me at a deep level during this time, things that God knows I need, whether that
Hmm.
could be inner peace or calm because he knows I'm having a rough time, whether it's wisdom for tasks that he knows I'm struggling with, or whether it's nudges to get out of my comfort zone, try and do new things, or or whether it's just giving me a sense of inner calm or peace. It's God acting in me at a deeper level, and me just sitting with God and resting with God. I mean, if you think of
Yes.
the Bible verse, "Be still and know I am God." It's what you're doing. You're being still and knowing He's God and just
Yes.
sitting with God. So it's another way of praying. And by all means, don't give up your other forms of prayer. Complement it with a silent prayer practice such as centering prayer, and see how it might deepen and enrich in your prayer life, as well as enriching your relationship with God, and make it stronger. Because, or think of it as you have a special friend or a lover or someone important to you. You don't always need to talk. You just like to be with that person and sit with that person, whether you're sitting together watching a movie, or sitting together on a bench looking at a beautiful scene, or just taking a walk and not talking. You can think of it in the same way. You're doing the same thing with God. You don't need to talk all the time.
Hmm.
It's a special God and you are just together, spending time together, beyond words.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up because I was going to say, we often go to God in prayer with all this chatter. God, I need, or God, can you help me? Or God, I'm in, it's usually we go to God in desperation or out of want. And we usually very rarely go to God in gratitude and to just sit with Him and to allow Him to be God. We go to God with all of these challenges. God, are you going to do this for me? Or God, can you help me? But we never really go and allow God to just be who He is and allow Him to work because we're so anxious. And it's because we can't be still and we can't be quiet. How do we get ourselves? Because you said when you started, you were ready and you were in a place where you were able to do this. How do we prepare ourselves and get in a position that we can be still? Be still. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So if you're new to centering prayer, yeah, I would say take baby steps. So start with 1 minute or 5 minutes. Or for example, when I do kind of introduction to centering prayer sessions with groups or churches, we will do a sit together and we'll just do it for 5 minutes. And most of the time, the reaction is that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. So the first thing I would say is take baby steps. So start with a small amount of time, whether it's 1 minute or 5 minutes, and work your way up. Just like if you're joggers and runners, you get the runner's high after a while. You get the centering prayer high, so to speak, after you've given it a chance and worked your way up, starting with a small amount of minutes and slowly increasing it over time. And then I would also encourage people. They'll say, "Well, when should I do it?" So I'll say, for, what I do is it's that's how I begin my day. For me, it's the best way to start my day. It's God and I sitting together and partnering to begin the day. And then I don't think of it as I'm sitting with God and then goodbye, God, and I'll see you again at the next sit. We're getting up together and partnering on the tasks that I need to do throughout the day. And then I take a second sit later in the day, and it's God and I sitting again, and then God and I getting up and partnering again to finish out the day with the tasks that I need to do. So I encourage people, make it the first thing you do in the morning, and just get up a little bit earlier, depending upon how long you're going to sit. And then after a while, if you've been successful at doing it, once a day, I encourage people add a second sit at some point during the day, and maybe even take the same approach. If you have to make that second sit just a few minutes and slowly increase the time for that second sit. Because I think what you'll find, and you have to do it for yourself to look to discover this, but many people will say, I don't have time for that second sit, I'm too busy, I can't stop what I'm doing. And at least what it has what's happened for me is when I do that, my second half of the day is very productive and
Hmm.
very powerful, and I get the things done I need to get done. So it has a way of giving you back time. And,
Yes.
and, if, and if you think about it, really during centering prayer, you're letting go. It gives you the same posture outside of your centering prayer time. You let go of the things that don't help you, and you hone in and focus on the things that do help you, that you need to do. So it
Yeah.
does have a way of giving you back time. So those are some things I like to tell people that are starting centering prayer, in terms of take the baby steps. You don't need to jump right into 20 minutes. And then I tell them start with a morning sit and just get up a little bit earlier. And then I encourage them, add a second sit and try it and see what it does and see how it helps you finish the day, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because, you know, I believe strongly everything that the Bible tells us. And, it says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. And so if we put God first, then, like you said, the rest of the day will be productive. But oftentimes, I know people get anxious and they go, I don't have enough time, or how can I just sit for 20 minutes? And, but if you think about all the tedious things that you really think that you have to do that aren't really necessary, when you allow God to take over and give him the opportunity to order those footsteps, he will make the path easier and straighter for you. And you will feel so much lighter when you walk away from that time with him. And like you said, it can be in any form of that conversation that you take on, whether it be, mostly you say silence is the best way, but whether it be if you are with your eyes open, or if you are chanting a word or saying a word that you are bringing back, or if you're focusing on your breath, or if you are just in silence, just that moment that you take to just regather yourself and let go of all of that. It lets go of the anxiety and helps you to relax, and then you feel more at ease when you get ready to go, and you feel better. So how can you, when you work with people and coaching them on it, how do you help to ease their anxiety and ease them into having a better understanding that when they let go of the other stuff, it gets easier for them?
Um, well, I guess one thing I help them with is what method to use. So we'll talk a lot about when you're doing centering prayer. What should I use a word? Should I use an image? Should I use my breath? So I'll just ask them a lot of questions. Are you an auditory person? Are you a physical person to use your breath, or are you more of a visual person, to help them hone in on what might be the best method? And then sometimes they might choose the word ocean, but then they begin realizing they're spending their time thinking about the ocean and how wonderful the beach is, and then realizing, well, they're not really doing a centering prayer sit, they're meditating on the ocean and the beach. So then they realize they should probably pick a different word. So I'll help them pick the right method. I'll help them choose, look at your life, and let your life dictate where you place your sits. So if life changes, change your sit. And I'll share some of my experiences. Like a couple years back, work was really busy, and I realized I actually needed more than two sits. So what I did was shorten each sit, and I still did a sit first thing in the morning, but I shortened it to 13 minutes instead of 20. And then I did a second sit right before lunch. And then about 2 hours after that second sit, I did a third sit of 13 minutes, because I needed it to get through the workday, the chaotic and hectic work days that I had. And then when work got better, I shifted back to two sits. So I tell people, be flexible with your sits, place them where they belong, um, and move them where they belong. As
Mhm.
the ebbs and flows of your life changes, it's okay to change where you put your sits, because you need to put your sits where they best belong to marry up with your life, and how God can best help you get through the entire day.
Absolutely. So what do you learn about self when centering yourself with God?
You learn, I guess you learn a lot about yourself, and that's, I guess, my website's called Silence Teaches Us Who We Are.
Yeah.
It's taught me who I am. um, I guess I guess what I like to do is, I'm a big believer in affirmations. So I'll jot down like one sentence, they're usually about one sentence in length, things that are important to me, whether it's related to my family and things I want to do with my family, or related to my career, or related to my mental or physical health, or related to other relationships that I want to have. They're jotted down on my iPad, but then what I do is I read them, and then I go into my centering prayer sit, because I like to think of it as that I'm letting them go to God, just like all the other thoughts that are coming up, and letting them brew with God so that I can partner with God on them. And then coming out of my centering prayer sit, I'll reevaluate them kind of all throughout the day from time to time, and look at it and see, how do I feel about some of those things? Are they, I guess I call it my true self barometer is, do I have an inner peace about it? And it's not really do I, is God giving me an inner peace about it? Is it something that excites me? Is it, even if it's out of my comfort zone, that's okay. God wants me to grow. We can't remain stagnant. And as long as it doesn't harm me or harm others, it remains, I guess I'll call it a true self affirmation.
Hmm.
So I'm constantly doing that and kind of thinking of what do I really want, and making sure it passes that barometer for me. And, asking God before I go into my sits, I'm going to let these brew with you, and I want to make sure that there's things that together we feel I should do. And once I don't feel right about any of them, then I either tweak them or I remove them. So it's just a kind of a constant process of growing into my true self. And well, my true self really is not an endpoint; it's a journey. So
Yeah,
it's a continuous journey until I'm no longer on this earth.
yeah.
So it's just God and I partnering on, what does God want me to do today? What does God want me to do 1 year from now? What does God want me to do 3, 5, 10, 20 years? So and that's what makes it exciting, at least for me. And I'm sure if you had me back on in 5 years or 10 years, my barometer might look a little bit different. Maybe my centering prayer sits have revealed to me a different way of looking at things, and how I should be discerning, what God wants me to do.
Hmm. So, and I want to ask you now, and maybe you can't tell me for everybody, but for yourself, what does a true self? How do we identify that true self and that true connection to God and self? What do we look for to see if we're really being authentic within ourselves? How do we know?
So the true self for me is really the person God wants me to be. But again, as I said, it's not an endpoint. It's a journey. And for me, I mean, I guess I'll come back to my discerning process is what I really just said. I bring my true self affirmations into my centering prayer sits, let them brew with God. Um, I actually read them before I go to bed, and let them brew with God while I'm sleeping. So that's for me where I'm at right now, in terms of letting them brew with God, and then just making sure I still have a sense of inner peace and calm and joy about them, and just making sure they're really, going to serve and help others and not harm others. Then
Hmm.
I can continue with them. And I keep asking God, help me discern what it is you want me to do, so that it's not, what does Rich want to do, but it's what is God and Rich together want to do. Because
Yeah.
I may want to do something, and God might be nudging me to do something else. So there might be things, there's things that I'm scared to do, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't do. And I'll give an example that, my book came out last August. And when it came out, I was thinking, well, I should probably do a Zoom book study, like a Zoom book study on a weekly basis. And I knew that, but I was scared to death to do that. And I really had never used. I've gone into Zoom and listened to others, but I never ran a Zoom session. So I was scared to do that, and it took me until about 7 weeks ago to create a Zoom account for myself, and then tell people, join me. I'm going to do a weekly book study, and we're going to do one chapter at a time. So that was my true self, and my true self was scared to do it. And now my true self isn't scared to do it. And I
Yeah.
did the last week. I did the seventh. Last Saturday I did the seventh one. This Saturday will be the eighth one. There's 14 chapters in the book, so that type of stuff. So there's other true self things that I know I should be doing, and they scare me. But it's God kind of pushing me to say, "You got this. Do it. Just trust me, and let's go. Don't be afraid."
Yeah. So, what caused you to write this book and really put it out there?
Sure. So, and I mentioned, I found Centering Prayer in 2013 in Amos Smith's book, and I reached out to him and we began a nice dialogue um, on his website. And then actually we're friends now, and we interact at least once a month or so. We have a phone call. He lives on the West Coast, I live on the East Coast, but we've been friends at this point. But he's the one that challenged me to write a book. He recognized that I was very interested in centering prayer, very interested in the Jesus paradox. And initially, I began working off of his website, and I had a weekly meditation go off of his site until I created my site, Silence Teaches, 4 years ago. But he's the one that challenged me fairly early, because I started interacting with him in late 2013. And by, I think it was like May or so of 2014, he said to me, "I think you have a book in you, and I think you have something interesting to say about centering prayer that can help people." And he said, "Go off, take 2 weeks, and just jot down some things about centering prayer that you've recognized or are important to you." And I did that and came back to him, and he said, "Well, there's your 13 or 14 things. Those are your chapters. Go write your book." Well, and he had written that book, and he was writing a second book. First, I thought he was crazy, and I wasn't going to just go off and write a huge book. And I had never written anything more than 6 or 7 pages. Even in college, I didn't have to write a lot of papers with some of my classes. So I just picked one of the thoughts, and I don't remember which one it was, and wrote a chapter over about 2 weeks or so, emailed it to him. And to my surprise, he said this, it was interesting, and he thought I had something here. And he said, "I really think you ought to move forward with writing a book. I think you could do it." So then I talked to my wife and I said, how do you feel about me writing a book?" And because I had, 2 kids at that time, or 3 kids at that time, what am I saying? And she said, "Yes, why don't you try it?" So I decided I didn't want to take time away from the family. So I actually disciplined myself to write the book on Saturday mornings. So got up, and this is pre-COVID. I got up, drove to the local Starbucks, and I wrote with my laptop, got a cup of coffee at Starbucks, of course. And from about 6 to 9 or 10 in the morning, wrote the book there. And that's really how the book got written. It got written in Starbucks every Saturday for the most part. So it was
Wow.
also, it was Amos Smith's fault. No, but it was the greatest, the best thing. It was, so there was not something even on my mind. It was him saying, enjoying our dialogue and back and forth, and him saying, I really think you could write a book, and I think you have something to say, and I think you should share it with others." And he helped me through the process of writing the book, putting it into a nice format, editing it, and then reaching out to publishers and hopefully finding one to publish it. And I did. And the book, was published in August of last year by Anam Cara Books, and is doing well. So it's been the whole process of it was actually a spiritual exercise, because most of the time, I didn't know what I was going to write until I
Mhm.
sat down and prepared to write. I mean, there's a chapter in the book that really talks about the Jesus of history, and historically, what do we know about him? And in that chapter, I did some research to figure out, well, what do I think is important to tell people? That's probably the only chapter that had a lot more research before I wrote. But the other chapters were really just me and a spiritual journey, and me sharing what is centering prayer, and me sharing how it has healed and transformed me throughout the various chapters in the book.
Awesome. So you spoke about your wife and her supporting you in writing the book, and that's awesome. But when you pray, do you all pray together? Do you have a time that you do a family prayer together and are centered together, or do you do it individually? How do you all come together in prayer?
A little bit of all of what you've said. So we've there's been times at dinner where we go around and pray, or just say what we're thankful for. Um, so mostly that. So I guess dinner time is a time where we just either pray for someone, or what we're thankful for. And then I know individually, are the different my children and my wife on their own pray in their own manner. And in
Mhm.
fact, my children, uh, my daughter and my youngest son, were curious about centering prayer when I first started practicing, and they wanted to know what is Dad doing, because my second sit at that time was in the basement, and they wanted to know what I was doing in the basement. So I invited them down, but they wanted to each have their own special time with Dad. So I had to like invite one of them down one at a time, not both together at the same time. So I
Mhm.
shared centering prayer, and actually from time to time would do a centering prayer with them. So my son at that time was 6, and we would do a 1 minute silent sit together. We would actually light a candle, and then we would read from there. There's a contemplative outreach app that I can put on my iPhone, and we would read a verse that just simply said, "I open my heart to your love," and then the bell would go off, and we would sit together for 1 minute, and then the bell would ring, signifying that 1 minute was up, and my son would blow out the candle, and then we would just talk a little bit, and that was our centering prayer time. And then my daughter wanted to understand it as well, and she was fearful of falling asleep, so she did the method with the eyes open, and I got her up to 10 minutes at times. Well, she didn't. Well, she thought it was 6 or 7 minutes, and I was actually just setting the timer 3 or 4 minutes higher than what she thought, and surprising her with she made it 10 minutes, not 7 minutes,
Wow.
which for a 13-year-old girl, to keep a 13-year-old girl quiet for that long is probably amazing within itself.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, because these days, to get kids to sit still for any amount of time, and especially in prayer, that is awesome. And we usually do prayer at dinner time, and when we get in the car when we would go to school in the morning, we would always pray on the way to school or to different events, and we try to do things as a family. So I think that having that connection is really great, and so and having your family involved, because when they go out, they know where to resort back to, and they don't. And again, they don't have to do it out loud or anything. They can do it in silent, right in their head, and know where they can go if they need to just go in silent prayer for a minute. And so, can you just talk about for just a second how it's changed your life? I know you talked about how it's worked in your life, but where were you from before you started the centering prayer to now? How has it transformed
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely has. I mean, it definitely, and that was really one of the main purposes of writing the book, is I wanted to share how it has healed me and transformed me, and that it could do the same for others if they want to try a practice such as centering prayer. So if I think about how am I different from June 2014 and in the present versus prior to practicing centering prayer, I would say a couple things. One, I just have a bigger excitement for life and enjoying the present moment and trying to be more present in the moment with whatever it requires, whether that's me doing something, whether me saying something, or whether me just listening. So I think just a bigger excitement for life. Um, I'm better at listening and less reactive instead of thinking what I should say or how I should react, or being so quick to react when someone says something. I think I'm better at just listening to them, and being there for them rather than reacting and giving them tips and giving them advice, which most of the time isn't what that the other person wants. They just want to know you're listening to them and there for them. It's given me a lot of confidence, because I'm doing things now that the idea of them scared the heck out of me. Getting on and talking with you, I can't even imagine I would have done something like this years ago. Writing a book, I do a lot of speaking to groups, and it comes very easy to me and naturally to me. So it's just given me a boost of confidence that I definitely didn't have before. And then I would say, which really are nudges to get out of my comfort zone. So it's given me a continuous nudge to get out of my comfort zone and do that thing that scares the heck out of me, but I know it is that God wants me to do. Like I mentioned, 10 minutes ago or so, when I said when I was scared to death to do a book study via Zoom, and now I'm not. So I really need to probably take a step back and think, well, what else should I be doing that I know scares me, and maybe I don't know how to do it because it's new, but it is something I should probably try, and it will work out. I just need to take the first step, and then the path will become more clear. So it's given me nudges to get out of my comfort zone. And then lastly, I would say it's just given me a lot of more inner peace and calmness, and knowing that, you know, I guess I really think of it as I sit with God, and then I get up and walk with God. And God is always present and always with me. So when I'm fearful and worrying and anxious, that's because I'm forgetting that God is with me. He's not sitting in the chair where I was. He's actually with me, partnering with me as I move through the day.
You are absolutely correct. And I mean, everything you've said, it just re-edifies the whole reason why I do mindfulness. And it's so funny because I centered my whole business around Jesus. And when I started this whole mindfulness thing, I was like, I'm taking this in a whole different level and a whole different approach. It's going to be on transforming people through the renewing of their mind. And the whole purpose of you being on this show tonight, that you picked Monday Mindfulness, goes hand in hand with I know God is in this thing, because it just further goes to what mindfulness is all about. It's about being in the present moment. It's about listening, not to respond, but just to listen, just to be there for support. It's also to not be reactive and to not be, like you said, not to be responsive, not to be reactive, but just to be there and to be present, to be attentive, and to engage someone, to let them know that you are listening, because God's always listening to us. But are we really listening to Him and what He's trying to tell us? And so being silent with Him, sitting with Him, allowing Him again to do what He does, and that's lead us. That's when He gives us that strength. That's when He gives us that confidence. That's when He allows us to be able to step out of who we think we are and really become who He created us to be. And that's a beautiful thing. And so we get so bogged down with being afraid of what we don't know. And when we just let go and allow God to lead us, just being present in His sight, He gets the glory and He's satisfied with that. And so just the fact that you're on here sharing what He's done for you and how He's opened these doors, how now you're helping other people and showing them how to be centered. It's not just for you, it's not just for me, it's for anybody who wants this relationship with God. All they have to do is sit down in a space wherever they can find that's comfortable for them and just spend a few moments with God. So while we have the opportunity, before you go, if you would like just a few minutes to just share with people how they can get in that moment, how they can find out more about getting with you to learn more about getting centered with God, and how maybe they might reach out to you, or if they would like to learn more about getting in that present moment and having a little more of a closer relationship, learning how to pray, because a lot of times people don't get the praying is just having a conversation with God. They think it's something that they've got to go through school or they got to study it, or so can you just touch on just what you do as far as helping people understand what prayer is, how to get centered, and how they might work with you?
Sure. Well, I guess the best place to find me is silenceteaches.com. And then when you subscribe to my site, you'll receive my free, it's a short, free centering prayer ebook. So if they know nothing about centering prayer, there is a centering prayer page, but then they'll also receive the centering prayer ebook, and they can learn more about what it is and how do you do it. So the ebook kind of has a question at the top, and then it answers that question, and then they flip to the next page. So the ebook is structured really just to answer questions about centering prayer and help them. And then obviously I have a contact me page. I love dialogue. So anytime anybody reaches out to me, whether it's on my contact page of my website or whether they find me on social media, I always read what I get and I respond fairly quickly because I love just to interact with people. So I would say, come to my site, get the free ebook, take a look at the centering prayer page. And then if it's something they think they want to go deeper in, check out the book. The book is on the site. See if it's something that they'd want to take a look at. The book is available right now in paperback and Kindle. And the book is called Sitting with God, A Journey to Your True Self Through Centering Prayer. And it really talks about what is centering prayer, but it puts it in very easy, everyday language to tell people what it is and to discuss, my journey through it and how it has helped me and healed me and transformed me and helped me continue to live my true self on a daily basis. So they could take a look at the book. And then if some people want more help, I offer one-on-one coaching for different types of people. Some people are brand new to centering prayer, so I help them get started and create what I call a long-term sustainable practice. And then there's some people that have been practicing a while, and I help them go deeper in their practice and ask lots of questions to them. And because they want to go deeper with God and they want to know who is my true self and how do I become my true self. And we'll talk a lot about that type of dialogue. And then I also I've had some clergy where they're the first ones to admit that they'll tell me I'm not setting a good example. I'm serving in my ministry, but I'm not taking the time for prayer. So I need someone to hold me accountable that I need to be taking time in silence. So I've worked with clergy to make sure they take the time for silence otherwise they're going to burn out and they're not going to be
Mhm.
any good for whoever they're trying to serve. So I've helped actually clergy, believe it or not, priests and pastors and different people across different denominations who recognized they need some type of practice like this or they're going to burn out. They're not doing very good with self-care of themselves and they needed help. They were so good at helping others except themselves. So I've when I look at my coaching, I almost see three different areas that I know I've helped in. It's the new to the practice, people already practicing but that want to go deeper and explore their true self, and then clergy who need help with with self-care.
Yeah.
So come to my site and you'll see the book, the free ebook, and then you'll see information about coaching. And then I'll do a lot of guest speaking as well with churches and centering prayer groups and other groups to come in and talk. Either sometimes they'll ask me to talk about a specific topic, or they'll simply ask me to come in and just talk about my book and share some key points in the book, and then lead them into the silence. Some of the groups have centering prayer as part of their meeting. So I go into the Zoom meeting and give a talk, lead them into the silence, and then after the centering prayer sit, we have a Q&A dialogue. So those are some of the things I'm doing. So I guess to answer your question again, just come to my site, silenceteaches.com. And if you reach out to me, I love dialogue. So I'll dialogue with whoever reaches out to me. You're going to hear from me, and I love to interact with people.
Awesome. So, what is next for you in centering prayer? Are you looking at another book, or are you a minister? Are you a ministry in that aspect?
No, I'm not a minister, and I have a day job that I do as well during the day. So this is just something that has been so life giving and life riching to me that it spawned all of this. It spawned the book, and it spawned me doing coaching, and it spawned me speaking and getting in front of groups and teaching it. So really right now what I've been focusing on is getting on a lot of shows such as yours and podcasts just to share centering prayer and my book. And I've been getting in front of a lot of groups at churches as well and speaking, and I've gotten in front of spiritual director groups. So really, I guess my focus right now is share the book with as many people as I can, whether it's individually or in a group session or in a podcast or in some type of speaking session, and share centering prayer in case it can help that group.
Awesome. Now, do you have a podcast yourself, or do you just have the website?
Just the website. I do not have a podcast.
Well, you need to get a podcast. You got to get a podcast going.
Well, if
here.
I have the time to do that, it's something that I probably should do at some point in the future. You're right.
Yeah, you can do 5-minute segments of centering prayer. You can just come on and do like a 5-minute centering prayer on the podcast and go. It's real simple.
You might have something there, because what I do is I do Facebook lives, and then what I'll do is I'll save the video and then I'll put it on YouTube so
Yeah.
that there's the YouTube presence of what I did on
Yeah.
FaceTime. But I think you have a good point there.
Yeah.
That's almost similar, where I would be doing
Yeah.
something like that for a podcast. So
Yeah, all you have
maybe
to do is download that audio and write to your podcast, and we can talk about. I can help you out. We can talk about that after
that would
we
be
end
super.
this. Yeah.
So then it's not going to be as difficult as I think it will be, is what you're
Not
saying.
not at all. It's so easy, and God will open up a door for you. But hang out with me.
Thank
Is
you.
there anything else that you would like the audience to know, or you'd like to share before we jump off of here?
I would just simply say, encourage people to try it. Take baby steps. Just try 1 minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes of silence and do it first thing before you begin your day, and try it for 1 month and see what happens, and see if you like it and see if it's a practice for you. And then if you discover it is, to begin lengthening how long you do it, and then add a second sit over time. So just try it, but start slow with baby steps.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Hang out for just a second while I get us out of here. Thank you so much for joining in tonight. I hope you are able to learn something new about prayer, that you don't just have to speak out loud when you're in prayer. Sometimes you can just sit in silence. Maybe you might be driving down the street and sitting at a stop sign. You can sit in silence through that stop sign or through the traffic light, or maybe you're just taking a walk and you can spend that time with God. But no, you can take 2 to 20 minutes to center yourself in prayer. It's a wordless meditation, but it's not just meditation, it's spending time with God. There are 4 guidelines to doing this. You sit in a comfortable space. You can close your eyes or you can keep them open if you feel like you're going to fall asleep. You introduce a sacred word into your mind, or you can focus on a sound, or you can focus on a visual aspect, or something that you can focus on, maybe your breath, and then you'll reintroduce that word, and then just let go of that word and just center yourself with God. Take baby steps, and then just start out slowly, and just know that there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just all in what works for you. Know what works for you. Try out some different things, but know that God's not going to be mad at you for trying to spend time with Him. He just wants you to spend time with Him. And then begin your day in prayer. In the middle of your day, go to prayer. At the end of your day, end it in prayer. And then you know what? Life will start getting easier. Things may not change the way you want them to, but you'll start changing. Your life will seem a little bit different than it was before. Things that used to bother you won't bother you like it used to. It doesn't mean that those things are going to go away, but it means the way you looked at those things, the way you felt about those things will start to change, because you know that you serve a God that can do anything. And He has a bigger influence on your life than anything in this world. He will give you strength, and He will show you favor, and He will show you grace. So show Him a little bit of your time. So I hope you learned something today on this Monday Mindfulness. Join me tonight when we go on live at 10:35. So we will do a Monday night mindfulness, and we will do a meditation on centering prayer. So we will learn a little bit of meditation tonight on centering prayer. Usually we do a meditation, but tonight we'll do one focused on centering prayer, since this mindfulness Monday is on prayer. We'll continue that on till tonight. So thank you very much for joining us. If you would like to get a hold of Rich, go to silenceteaches.com. He's got a free centering prayer ebook that you can get, and you can learn some new stuff. It's not going to hurt you to take a step out on faith, because God takes a chance on you every morning that He wakes you up. So have a good day. Remember, and never ever forget, you were created with a purpose. So you might as well be great. Have a good evening. God bless you. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you. Thank you so much.